Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to learn about the carbon cycle, and I'm going to learn how to make a Zoom thing that you can look at your leisure. Okay, so carbon is the most important cycle. Nitrogen is pretty important too, but I do agree with the Amoeba sisters that carbon is my favorite. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to ask you questions, and then I'm going to pause, and then I'll explain them. Okay, so in the video, the Amoeba Sisters video, they talked about reservoirs of carbon. Look at the screen and see if you can find another word that they could use instead of calling something a reservoir. If you looked up here, you would see they're using the word pool of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Sometimes they also call it a sink. So a sink, a reservoir, and a pool are all words for the same thing. And that means a place where carbon or nitrogen or whatever element we're looking at can be stored for a long period of time, or maybe short, but generally they're talking about a long period of time. So we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is a gas. You should know that it is one of the greenhouse gases. It is the second most common gas in the atmosphere after, greenhouse gas in the atmosphere after water vapor. So carbon dioxide is really important in keeping the planet warm enough for us to live on. Otherwise, it would be not much above freezing on average. However, too much of anything is never good, and that's a problem that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So first, the arrows are showing the movement of carbon or the flow of carbon, the pathway of carbon. So look at how many arrows you see that are entering the atmosphere. Take a look at them. Okay, then look at how many arrows you see going out of the atmosphere. Okay, so you should now see why it is very difficult to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because there's a lot more ways we can put it in the atmosphere than get it out. So let's talk about the natural ways first. Okay? And natural ways are like creatures living just on their own, basically without burning fossil fuels. Okay, so here we have respiration, puts carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. You know you breathe out carbon dioxide, and you also breathe out water. Remember that, right? And that's why the coronavirus, if you have it and you're breathing it out, is going to be on those little aerosol droplets of water that comes out in the process of respiration. Okay, but I digress. So respiration, from here, you'll see an animal. Why do you also see respiration coming out of a tree? A tree is a plant. Well, a plant is a living thing, so a plant also does respiration. And then you see carbon dioxide coming out of what looks like the soil here. And actually, most of the respiration that happens on Earth is in this place and this place. Not much about animals, and definitely not much about humans. We contribute very little of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. So, from our natural processes. Because there are so many decomposing organisms, the detritivores, the little insects that are breaking things down, as well as the microbes, of which there are gazillions. And then there's a lot more plants than there are animals too. So most of the respiration actually comes from plants and from soil microbes. So here we go with respiration. Then the kind of counterbalance to that is the photosynthesis. You have photosynthesis occurring in plants, so they're able to take the carbon dioxide and fix it into their tissues in the form of glucose. The same thing happens here, because you have algae living in the ocean. However, also some of that carbon dioxide is just absorbed into the ocean sort of through wave action here. And then it's also diffused back out as well. So that's why you have this movement in and out. It's dissolved into the ocean and it kind of diffuses out of the ocean. While it's in the ocean, it can be used to make the carbonate shells of shelled organisms in the water. It also has, it's taken up through the organisms. So you have a fish that eats some algae and a bigger fish eats that, and then eventually it dies and it decomposes. And then that carbon is taken up again in plants that live in the water. And the same thing happens on land. When the plants decompose and the animals decompose, then those atoms of carbon can then be reused. And I'm not sure if it's showing it here. It doesn't really. It should show that that carbon that's in the soil is taken up in the plants. And then the animals eat the plants, and that's how they get the carbon. Now, what really throws this whole thing out of whack, and which is the biggest problem facing the world today? No, it's not coronavirus. That is bothering us as individuals. But if you think of the planet as a whole, actually, the coronavirus is pretty much of a good thing, because it means we're doing a lot less of this. We are not using as much fossil fuels in factories and in cars. So this flow up here is stopping. What this flow is doing is adding extra carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. If I asked you when that started, what would you say? When did we start doing that? If you said the Industrial Revolution, then you are correct. So in a mere 200-300 years, math is not my strong point, we have been burning a lot of carbon. And if you look at a curve, you'll see it's kind of a J curve, bumped along, bumped along, bumped along around the beginning. But towards the 60s, when people were having even 2 cars in a family and everybody was driving and people were getting on planes, we really started to increase our use of carbon, fossilized carbon that's down here, which is another flow that I didn't talk about. So when things die, they generally decompose, right? And then plants can take up that carbon and put it into their tissues, and then it can go up the food chain. However, in special situations where something is buried under a lot of heat and pressure for millions and millions of years, it can convert molecule by molecule into coal, if it was a plant, oil and gas, if it was these little like microbe small things that are living in the water. None of this came from dinosaurs. No, don't even think that. So anyways, what are 2 ways that carbon dioxide can be removed from the atmosphere? Photosynthesis, and then absorption or diffusion into the ocean. What is, oh, one is not in this picture. What are 2 natural ways, that carbon dioxide can enter the atmosphere? Or maybe we could say 3. There's this one, respiration. I should see if I can draw on this. Let me see. I think I could if I did that. Now, for next time, I'll learn how to draw. Okay, so photosynthesis can take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. I mean, I'm sorry, we said going in, right? All right, so respiration puts carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And some of it can diffuse out of the ocean. And the amount that comes out of the ocean is about the same as the amount that goes into the ocean. Respiration is about equal to photosynthesis. What's not being shown on this diagram, a natural way, is a volcano. But if you think about it, I mean, there's going to be a lot of carbon dioxide that comes out of a volcano when it erupts. However, that doesn't happen very often. What is happening all the time is the combustion of fossil fuels. So I hope I gave you a little bit extra understanding of the carbon cycle. And I hope that was helpful. If you need any guidance, you can ask me some questions via email or remind. I hope to see you sometime soon. Bye.